we're going to invite Timothy Sheehy and Alex Giannaris to take the next presentation. They're going to explore some practical strategies for optimising seating and wheelchair prescription while balancing postural support, dignity and independence. And they're also going to talk to us about a really unique wheelchair prescription algorithm that's been developed by Melbourne's specialist Huntington's disease multidisciplinary team. So they're just heading up to the stage now. There they are, and we'll make them feel very welcome. Thank you so much.
This is Alex, who's an OT by background. We're both from Calvary Healthcare Bethlehem in Melbourne. We'd like to say thank you to the organisers here for letting us talk about this topic that we're pretty passionate about. And a clicker. So we'll just wait for the presentation to come up. We'd also like to acknowledge that we're gathering on the traditional lands of the Kaurna people and pay respects to the elders past and present. So today we're going to be talking about a few things. We're going to discuss how the needs change for seating in wheelchairs across the stages of Huntington's disease, how the symptoms present, so career, cognitive impairment, and behavioural symptoms influence how we prescribe seating options. We're going to go through some case studies of our patients with Huntington's and demonstrate some of the challenges and solutions that we try and figure out. And then lastly, we'll discuss the algorithm that we use at our centre to script wheelchairs for people with Huntington's. So I guess whenever we're in the process of scripting seating wheelchair options, we need to consider all these factors which is kind of shown here in this decision tree. Now, I'm sure I'm missing a few that I hadn't thought of, but I guess the factors within the red circle are what's specific to our patients with Huntington's, and you can see there's quite a number of them, and I think we can all agree that's what makes it challenging for us as clinicians to get it right for our patients.
Okay, so I'll start off. So if you Google Huntington's chair, you'll find that there are multiple chairs marketed online, but in reality there is no single chair that fits this population. So as you can see from these photos, these three chairs are actually all quite different. And as Tim has just mentioned as well, in Huntington's we're managing a mix of career, cognition, behaviour, a condition that is constantly changing. So no single chair, unfortunately, can't meet all these needs, and we really need to rely on our clinical reasoning and, most importantly, lots of trials. So before we even look at equipment, we need to determine what the goal of the chair is. Is the person using it just to rest in? Are they going to be eating in it? Maybe they're doing both. Where is the chair being used? Is it being used in a private home, perhaps in like an SDA, an NDIS funded house, or in aged care facilities? Private homes do tend to be a lot smaller, which can limit, on what we're going to prescribe, whereas an SDA or a residential facility tends to have, larger spaces for the use of equipment. You also need to consider who's going to be using the equipment, so you might have multiple staff members involved. So you want to try and keep it simple, consistent and safe across all the users. Considering as well, including the multidisciplinary team, so if the chair is going to be used for eating, you might get the speech therapist involved. Perhaps they need to be sitting up more upright to ensure safe swallowing. So the goal really of the chair isn't just comfort, it might be in this situation, having them in a supportive position for meal times. And then you also want to consider risk. So it's something as simple as a foot plate, which people can stabilize on and help with their positioning in the chair, could then in fact be a trip hazard if a person is impulsive. So yeah, you need to balance all these things while also considering the dignity of risk, as we won't be able to eliminate all the risks for that person. A bit slow. Oh, sorry. Trying to figure out this. You can do the clear.
Lights off.
Oh, here we go. So once we've identified the seating goals, the next step is to look at what's actually available on the market. So in reality, it's very unlikely that one chair will meet all the needs of a person, so we need to identify what features that person needs. So you want to work closely with your suppliers, it's critical here, and being clear about your clinical reasoning, allowing them to suggest customizations and accessories that might not obviously be obvious to you initially. Trials, as I mentioned, are essential. We need to have the right people involved, including their formal and informal supports, so we can get meaningful feedback. So you might have their carers, family members involved, and try and have the trial for longer than an hour if you can, because it's rarely enough in an hour. People will often present differently when they know that they're being watched. So building in time for distraction helps us to see how actually the chair is being used. And in some cases, we may need to make decisions without a full trial, particularly when customizations are involved. So that's where feature matching and clinical reasoning becomes critical. And finally, managing the expectations of you as the therapist, but also of the family, for the family and the client as well, because in reality, there's no perfect chair, and our role is really to prioritize the features that will have the greatest impact on function, safety, and the quality of life. So I'll just highlight some key features that I would consider. As I previously mentioned, where the person's living, how long they're intending to use the chair, is it going to be a chair that they're sitting in for the majority of the day, and also have a look at what chair they're currently using and why this isn't working for them. Durability is also very important, so metal fittings are preferable due to the force of the uncontrolled movements. As well, plastic fittings I do tend can break over time. Safety is also a key consideration. So people with Huntington's disease can often move into tight or unusual positions. So we need to minimize entrapment risks and cover any exposed hard frames or any areas that they could potentially get a limb caught in. Foot plates, as I previously mentioned, but they're a good example of balancing function and risk. They can help the person with bracing in the chair and getting, their bottom back into the chair. But then if they're standing up on their own or they're impulsive, then, it can be a trip hazard for them. So just keeping that in mind. Postural supports as well, like a seat dump, laterals and harnesses as well can also be very helpful, particularly in managing someone who's got excessive trunk movement and prevent them from sliding down in the chair. And towards the later stages of the disease, tilt in space is often a feature, a non-negotiable feature for me usually, because it reduces the person from sliding, reduces shear from occurring, and improves their safety, all with the use of gravity. Yeah. So I'll just talk through the different stages of the disease. So rather than thinking about seating as an individual chair, I try and find it more useful to think about how the seating needs change across the progression of the disease. So in the early stages, people are often living quite independently. They may still be working, driving, and managing their daily routines. So at this point, seating is less about support and more about acceptance and function. So things like electric lift recliners can work really well here. They look familiar to people. They also fit well in the home environment, and they can help with supporting fatigue by being able to elevate your legs and rest back. But even at this stage, you're already starting to think ahead. Is this chair going to meet their needs now or in 6 months' time? Moving on then to the mid stage of the disease. So this is often, I find, the most complex stage, as people can still be mobile, but they're also experiencing or could be experiencing increased chorea, reduced balance, and perhaps they're impulsive as well. So the aim here is trying to keep the person safe and supported while still enabling them to transfer and move as independently as possible. So, for example, a lift function of a recliner might be helpful for transfers, but if someone is impulsive, they may not wait for the chair to be raised up. So, in fact, then that could be a risk and a trip hazard. Adding more supports, like lateral supports, can improve positioning, but they may also make transfers more difficult if you can't get them out of the way. And again, involving the multidisciplinary team as well. So if they're, transferring in an unusual way, you might have the physio involved. As I previously mentioned about speech and position, or swallowing and meal times, you might have the speech therapist involved, and then a neuropsychologist for any behavior support. And often there isn't the perfect solution. We're trying to make the best possible decision based on a number of competing risks. And then the late stages of the disease, the focus then shifts again. So people typically will have high care needs and often requiring, say, a hoist for transfers. And at this point, seating becomes much more about safety, positioning, and comfort. So the use of tilt in space is essential here to maintain posture and reduce the risk of sliding in the chair. And we're often perhaps introducing or looking at postural supports or laterals here as well to help the person sit upright. Aesthetics tend to be less of a priority, and the chairs do tend to look a bit more clinical. On my next slide, I've got a few examples. So yeah, really, you're trying to work with the person, how they're presenting to you in that moment, as the seating needs will change as their condition progresses and changes over time as well. So we need to be realistic, adapt, and prioritize what matters most at each stage, knowing that there might not be a perfect solution. And we might not be providing the most perfect chair, but we're managing the risks that we've identified with the family. So I'll hand over the next slide. Has a few chairs, just a few different ones on the market. The far left is just, like a chair that you might use at meal times, perhaps in the early stages of the disease. And then you've got like a recliner up at the top, and then these are just other ones with different postural supports, leg rests, different features as well. So I'll hand over to Tim now, who will talk through about wheelchairs.
So now onto wheelchairs, and I guess wheelchairs can be divided, as you can see here. And I'll briefly go over each type, but really I'll be giving special attention to the ones that are manual and have a tilt and space function, because that's where I guess most of our effort's been required to try and improve for our patients. So folding manual wheelchairs are generally the first type of wheelchairs people will use when they need that extra assistance to access the community. It's cheaper than the other type of wheelchairs, and it can fit in most cars. However, there's a bit of a compromise. Because it's so lightweight, they tend to be more vulnerable to braking from career and behaviour concern. And they also tend to lack the level of support, pressure care, and padding to be appropriate for our patients in the long term. In terms of modifying these folding wheelchairs, we've had some okay outcomes in trying to reinforce the footplates. Either by the one on the left, which is the interlocking footplate kit, or an acrylic type overlay. We've kind of focused on the footplates because these are the ones that usually are the first that are broken and need replacing. But what then tends to happen is that, great, we can reinforce and make them stronger, but then the next vulnerable part of the system gets broken, which is probably a little bit higher up on the leg rest frame. In terms of power wheelchairs, look, it's something that we rarely do compared to the other types of wheelchairs due to the involuntary movements, the cognitive impairments, and psychiatric factors we need to consider. But if we do prescribe them, they generally tend to be attendant controlled, and it's mostly because the terrain isn't suitable for a manual wheelchair with a power assist. Such as this lady here who lived on a farm, and seeing her farm animals was such an important goal for her. That the power wheelchair here was really the only thing that could help navigate that environment, especially in wintertime in Victoria. It can get quite boggy and wet. So now to the non-folding type manual wheelchairs, and these are the types of wheelchairs that I'll focus on today, because most of our patients with Huntington's will generally have one at some point. Now, just quickly, when I say non-folding, I guess it's a little bit misleading, because technically you could fold some of these wheelchairs down you've got to remove the backrest, and you could fold down the two back canes. And if you have a ute with a ramp, you could push it up the ramp, but it won't fit in it won't be light enough and fit in most cars. So generally you will need a wheelchair accessible vehicle or a maxi taxi. And they're generally there for the long term, and we aim for a minimum of 50 degrees of tilt and space range to make sure we have enough support and pressure care for the future. Now, these wheelchairs have the ability to accommodate any type of pressure cushion that you want, any type of backrest that you need, and any type of headrest that the clinician and the patient and their family and supports feel is appropriate for that person. So back when I first started working with Huntington's, and that was probably around 2018, the old approach of scripting wheelchairs looked a little bit like this. So there was a backrest with inbuilt laterals, which made it easier for people who are living in SDA or group home settings when there's a large number of staff, and it was tricky to make sure that we try to make it as easy as possible for them, whereas swing away laterals might be a little bit more complicated. Headrest was usually on a single stem, and the only padding we were really familiar with or commonly prescribing were the waterfall armrests, which you can kind of see here, that would come on the inside of the armrest, and the intention was that they would protect the person from hitting the armrest frame from the inside. And usually the width would only be about the same width as a gel armrest, about 4 inches. But in actual fact, the person could still reach over on the other side and still hurt themselves, get the hands trapped in the wheels and various parts of the frame. Then to protect the legs, we would normally choose between either a calf strap, which you can see here, which is Velcroed back onto itself. But the issue there was that we had frequently families and their carers reporting they either get kicked in the face or some other parts of the body were then trying to bend down, undo it to allow the person to stand up or swing with a leg rest. And in the end, what we tend to see in the clinic is that they tend to be lost or forgotten and put somewhere else. And then essentially there'll be lots of space for the person then to get their foot into an awkward position and then risk further injury. The other thing we could consider would be a off-the-market foot box, and generally we had similar issues with the calf strap where they're also trying to cover a little bit more space, but essentially they're still Velcro back onto itself. A lot of the leg rest frame are still quite exposed, and so it didn't really reduce any of the injuries or the practicality for our patients and their families. And finally, neoprene covers generally just were a couple of millimeters of padding on the metal parts of the leg rest frame. And really, the millimeters of padding weren't really thick enough to prevent injury and to our patients, but also breaking of the wheelchair. So on to our case studies, and I hope you're okay seeing some of the videos of some of our patients. They can be quite confronting with the movements and some of the behaviors exhibited, but I think it will demonstrate nicely what the challenges I think we will go through when scripting wheelchairs and other seating options. So each case study will give you some insight of a different aspect of scripting a wheelchair. And I guess the first person here was one that kind of sparked the change that I felt that we needed to go from the old approach to a newer, better approach. So if the video plays without the sound, hopefully, you can see this person is quite a tall person, quite a strong person with quite a significant career. He also had quite significant cognitive impairment. He was nonverbal from very early on and had quite big behaviors of concern. And I guess, but despite all that, he could still kick a soccer ball better than most people, which was quite amazing. And I've got to be honest, I really wasn't sure when he ever needed a wheelchair, how we were going to approach it. Any form of folding wheelchairs, he would break, he would sit down, he'd slide off so easily. There was no way of trying to try and get him to sit properly in the folding wheelchair. And so we were, even when we were trying to script a tilt and space, non-folding type wheelchair, we weren't really sure whether we're going to actually have any good outcome in terms of robustness, but also reducing the injury of this person, because we're introducing lots of metal, lots of tires, and other bits that can cause injuries. So you can see from the middle and the right photo, we started to go about scripting this wheelchair with the old approach, which you can see is from the standard waterfall armrests that weren't very long or wide. So you can see his hands can still go around, they can be trapped in those wheels, they can go underneath the frame, and if he was pretty upset, he could still hurt himself. And then the off-the-shelf foot box, like I said, it didn't really cover much of the frame. It tried to occupy some of the space to give some support, but really this person, his feet was not going to be staying in that padded space. And you can see that we were all pretty frustrated, including the carer at the back of the third photo. So with this local supply, we tried because we were so frustrated, we said, we've got to do something different. And I guess what we came up was something like this. And so to kind of orientate yourself, so the first photo is the raw fitting stage of the wheelchair. So you can see there's no cover over any of the custom jobs that the local supplier did when we worked together on this. And the next two, it's what it looks like once we've finished the raw fitting, they've done some extra alterations, and then we've covered it up with the correct material. So you can see there's a fair bit different. There are much wider, usually about 6 to 8 inches wide armrests, and we were lucky with this person because they lived in a SDA with really wide doorways. And the armrest finished up behind with elbow returns so that none of the back canes or the person couldn't reach around behind or out to the side to try and get their fingers trapped or hit the frame. There was a rigid calf pad, and now you'll see that in most of my next photos. That's going to be something that's essential. We're no longer using calf slings. The rigid calf pad is simply a backboard with foam and leather, and it's fitted to underneath the seat pan, so there's no need for, if the person wants to stand up and we want to swing with a leg rest, there's no need to remove it at all. It's just there, and so there's less injuries to the families and the carers. And everything was pretty well reinforced, and we may have gone a bit overboard. As you can see, we've got 4 anti-tippers behind. That's probably a bit too much. But in the end, though, he was comfortable, the wheelchair was robust and supportive, and he didn't incur any further injuries, and the wheelchairs didn't actually need much repairs throughout his lifetime, except for one instance when the carer decided to go fishing with this person, then off-road track, and then that wasn't something we foresaw, so we had to repair the front 2 wheels. But in terms of repairs from the person, there was none of that needed. So that was a pretty good outcome for the first go. So I guess in the first case study, it was kind of to demonstrate how we can do it from the get-go. How can we ensure the wheelchair is right from the very original fitting? But this case study here is to kind of demonstrate that we can also do it retrospectively. So this person here, on the left, you can see he's got his original wheelchair, quite large tires, some thigh guards that his legs, which are definitely not providing any kind of support for his legs, going over the top or still going around the leg rest. You can see that they've lost the calf strap as well, like I said, it would happen. And so essentially this person here has no calf support or padding around the leg rest frames. And so essentially we were able to try and, this was with a different supplier, so just to demonstrate that we can do this with multiple companies, that we were able to fit a similar type of padding as you saw in the first case study, but really to try and match the movements that this person exhibited. And I think you can see through this video that this person's movements, that he was well protected, well supported, and there was no risk for him to hit any kind of metal frame to injure himself. And I'd like to say that was September, he got it with newly padded in September 2024, and no repairs yet since then. So it's pretty good, other than servicing some of the brakes, but that's something we can't really stop. So this third case study, I guess, is to talk about how do we approach now escalating, when people have escalating behaviors. And I guess we try to approach it similarly to someone who's got a significant career, but we have to kind of try and take into account that the movements are probably going to be more powerful, more ballistic, so we'd have to really make sure the chair is more robust, but also padded, because I don't know if you've ever thrown yourself backwards and on a wheelchair like this, and the headrest is supposed to be nice and padded and off the market, but really the foam is actually probably a couple of centimeters deep, and once you hit it, you don't sink into the foam, it just feels like a hard block. So again, we have to kind of make sure that we accommodate for that. In terms of robustness, we don't really tend to prescribe any more dynamic seating systems. There's several types in the market, because it's another thing that can wear out, break down, and it's it's another cost to then replace. But also it was quite tricky, because then there's certain rules with it. You've got to have it set up differently for going out in a vehicle rather than when they're stationary seated in the chair. And so if the person is bending down behind the back canes and trying to set it, and then suddenly the person throws themselves back, they get whacked on the head. So again, it really wasn't something we're doing anymore, but instead we're just using simple nylon straps from the back canes to the seat pan on one on each side, and that seems to have solved the issue, and they're much cheaper. Now, hopefully you don't find this too confronting, but I guess this video here will show you someone who is quite upset, and I just wanted to demonstrate, I guess, the forces that we have to work with, or trying to make sure that the wheelchair, A, is robust enough to take that, and we're not going to break it often, and secondly, the person is protected from the amount of padding there is. Okay. So moving on to dysonic postures, which is, again, something we can see in people with Huntington's. We don't really do anything new here in terms of trying to prescribe something for their abnormal posture. So for the trunk, we still do lateral trunk supports. We might bring in a shoulder harness if we need to as a last resort. And so the tricky thing though is, and this is what I want to demonstrate here, is how do we combine, I guess, lateral support when someone is, like in the last video, can be quite upset and throw themselves around. And because if we introduce lateral supports in certain things like the headrest, then I guess there's a risk of the casing or the back of the headrest, if it's swung in, to be in contact with the person as they throw themselves back. And generally those headrests, you need some sort of tool, Allen key, to try and loosen off to bring back out if you're worried that the person's going to hurt themselves. So I guess for this lady here, that wasn't going to work. So she had she then developed quite a dystonic head posture to the right side, as you can see in that video. And so we had to try and introduce a lateral support. Now, she originally had one which could swing in, but we had to replace it with a nice, thick, custom padded headrest because she was going to hurt herself. And we're trying to think, how can we make it so that she can have some head support, but also easy enough for the staff that when she does become upset, that it's nice, quick, and easy for them to remove it to make sure she doesn't hurt herself. So you can see here, we've kind of bent down, we bent some sort of a headrest stem to try and make it fit around this headrest. And then the main thing is that it's just a simple thumb screw that the staff can just literally undo, slide out the lateral support, and we can let the person be upset in their own time, and then reset it nice and easily and firm off the thumb screw when we want to have that lateral head support in place. And I guess for this lady, we've done it for her wheelchair and plus her day chair as well. So on to the final case study, and I guess all previous case studies have kind of shown how we've had really successful outcomes. But I've got to be honest, we haven't really worked everything out. And such as this person here, who I'll just play the video to demonstrate the movements that this person sustains and has to manage. And I guess for us, this is tricky for us as clinicians and families and carers to try and figure out a way to still reduce the injury to this person, but also the need for repairs for the wheelchair, which can be quite costly and also quite time-consuming in terms of the wheelchair gets taken away, the person's without a wheelchair or seating option that's viable for them, and again, that's not a great outcome. But you can see from this person here, so on the video, on the photo on the far left, that's what I demonstrated was the way we used to do an old approach, and that resulted in the leg rest being taken away because they were a injury hazard to the person. And then the staff were starting to use pool noodles, which I think a lot of people have experience using as to try and the cheap alternative to pad out the frame. But really it wasn't meeting the needs of this person. And so then, again, so he has now this wheelchair with all the padding required. But we're still trying to work out, I guess, the issue isn't the location of the padding and the support, it's really the material that we're using or the local suppliers using. So in terms of the foam, the covers, and also the way it's been stitched now. So we've had some success with the right leg rest. Before we started the video, you might have seen that one didn't have any tape over it because that still withstood and all of that movements. So then we had to do things a little bit in phases, modular, because of funding restrictions and just time pressure. But you can see on the left-hand side, there's quite a lot of tape to try and avoid exposure of the woodwork behind from when the foam and the material was kind of torn apart and receded. So we're getting there. We still have challenges which we're trying to overcome, but we're now to the point where we're trying to figure out the materials and the way it's being stitched. So I guess the final thing we want to talk about is the algorithm that we use at Calvary Bethlehem, and if you want to have a copy of it, more than welcome to scan the QR code. And I guess I'll go through what you'll see when you access this document to try and go through it a little bit. So it will start off with what are the non-negotiables. What's the essential basic tilt and space wheelchair that every person with Huntington should probably have? And if you get this right, if you have these features in place, and I guess the cost, if in the future you need to add padding or types of support, you don't have to then add more cost by changing the way the armrests are built or the way the calf pad's built. You can add as you go along rather than having to add more unnecessary cost to it. So you can see we want a wide headrest, a dual post armrest, and that's to take the weight of the pad of any future padding. We want to have a backrest with lateral support. I really advocate for inbuilt lateral supports. Now these backrests tend to be more custom made, but they just tend to reduce the complexity to manage this type of equipment, especially in people who live in SDAs or group homes with such a large number of staff. The rigid calf pad, like I always now talk about, it's something that we have to that we like to see to try and reduce the extra steps that people have to do to help the person stand up and get back into the wheelchair. And obviously other things like tilt space function, adjustable stroller handles to meet the different heights of the people pushing the wheelchair, and the tie-down points for transport. And then once you go down a little bit more in the document, you'll see that we've tried to map out, I guess, the symptoms that you may see with someone with Huntington's, and try to associate that with the code. And I guess then the codes then are modification of accessories that you may want to consider as clinicians, families, or carers. And it's not a hard rule. You don't, if you do see career, you don't have to have all the greens and all the reds. It's just to try and help you guide, try and help you think about these things and consider them whether they're right for your patient. Again, this is not the final, I guess. It's an ever-evolving document. I try to keep adding things that come up with each person I work with. Yeah. So these are the photos of the outcomes from the algorithm. So that's generally what we see here for people with more of a dominant upper limb career. And the one on the left is a raw fitting, again, from the get-go. The one on the right is, again, something that we've done as in retrospective to someone who already had a wheelchair for a couple of years. And again, different suppliers, different companies. We don't affiliate ourselves with a certain supplier. I think the more suppliers that are aware of the way we like to do things, the better for our patients. And then the next slide is all about if they have more of a full body career, arms and legs and trunk, and I guess this is what we have come as an outcome. You can see there's slight variations between each wheelchair. That can be because of the person's, different people have different tendencies, movements, postures, as well as functions. So the one on the right is the person still standing, so we've had to try and figure a way to make those as robust as possible, but also as padded as possible, but also ensure that the leg rest can still swing out to allow the person to stand, because we don't want to then encourage the person to lose the ability to transfer.
Okay, so just to finish, to wrap us up, so prescribing the chair or a wheelchair isn't the end of the process, it's really just the beginning, and we need to evaluate whether the chair is actually achieving the goals we've set out to at the start. So like I mentioned, eating, comfort, reducing sliding out of the chair or falls, and follow-up is critical, particularly as people begin to use the chair day to day. That's often when issues start to emerge or when additional training might be needed to staff around them. So involving your multidisciplinary team continues to be important here. For example, the swallowing, like I've mentioned already, you might have the speech therapist come out and do a review with you. And we also need to monitor how the equipment itself is performing. So if something is repeatedly breaking, you might try and come up with a solution with the supplier to have a more robust solution. And importantly, this isn't a one-off review, needs to change over time as the condition progresses. So regular check-ins are essential, particularly if the person is operating the chair themselves. You want to consider safety there as well. So yeah, seating, wheelchairs is never considered done. It's something we continue to review and adapt as the person's needs change. So just to summarise some of the key messages from today, there's no one size fits all. There's no single Huntington's chair on the market that will suit this whole population. It needs to be individualised to the person and how they're presenting and what stage of the disease that they're at, where they're living and the environment and the supports around them. So getting your multidisciplinary team involved is critical as well, and helping you understand their movement, cognition, behaviour, and their functional needs. And then from there, it's identifying your non-negotiables, which Tim has spoken through and myself earlier on, and what features are going to have the greatest impact on their safety and their function, and working continuously with the suppliers as well. And importantly, it's not a one-off process. So You don't just set the chair and forget. You will need to review and as the person is changing. Thank you. Any questions? If we've got time. We might have time.
Thank you so much, Tim and Alex there. I am conscious of time. If you have any general questions, we might have time for one or two now. Otherwise, I think there might be some pretty specific like personal questions, and if you do have them, I'm sure Tim and Alex are happy for you to find them and have a chat, even in just the lunch break as well. Or they might be able to give you that QR code again. And like we mentioned earlier, that those notes, the video will be available from Huntington's Australia. They will send that out in about a week or so's time, so you'll be able to catch up on that too. Does anyone have any general questions that they'd like to quickly ask Tim or Alex now? You're based in Melbourne?
Melbourne, yeah.
Yep.
In southeast Melbourne, yeah.
Just quickly, one question over here, and then... Oh, you've got one. Oh, look at me. I'm just double handling. So sorry. Hyper efficient here.
So my question is, how closely do you, speak to neurology prior to making modifications for, management of chorea and equipment breakage?
So you can see I love to take videos because I think photos don't really tell enough of a complete story for people with Huntington's. We want to, photos can lie, we can take the best photo, but videos are much better. So I'd often take videos, bring them when we're bringing it to MDT meetings to try and use it as a tool for neurologists and the MDT to understand the movements and maybe whether they're part of decision making, whether any titration of medication is required, but we don't really include the neurologist in terms to go into the clinical reason for the wheelchair prescription itself. It's more about if we see abnormal postures, behaviour, or movements that we want to try and make it a little bit easier for the person, but for everyone around them to try and get the more sustainable use of the equipment that they're using.
All right, I think that's it for the room here, and I'm conscious that we've also had a few new faces come in as well. So a huge round of applause for Tim and Alex. A really considered and thoughtful presentation there as well, very comprehensive. Thank you so much to the both of you.